Have you ever looked at someone and thought, "This makes no sense. Why do I even like this person?" Not just because the connection is intense, but because it violates your own rules, your values, your preferences, your identity. Maybe you tell yourself, "We're opposites." Different religion, different culture, different background. Maybe even a difference that your family or your past would never approve of. Or the logic gets even louder. "I don't go for men like that. Not someone 15 or 20 years younger. Not someone who's already married. Not someone who represents everything you normally avoid, don't entertain, don't align with, or don't even like." And that's when your mind starts spiraling, because if your attraction doesn't match your standards, your brain assumes something is wrong. You start questioning your intuition. You wonder if you're being delusional, manipulated, or pulled into a storyline you never asked for. So you ask the question that shakes your logic. How can this be my twin flame when this person goes against everything I believe in? In today's video, I'm going to answer that question in a way that doesn't just sound spiritual, it will actually make psychological sense. Because what looks like a contradiction on the surface is often a pattern underneath, a pattern with a purpose. We're going to explore why twin flame connections often form around the exact places where your mind feels most resistant, your beliefs, your identity, your boundaries, your cultural conditioning, and even your unspoken never list. And we'll talk about the difference between a soul-level activation that challenges your old constructs versus an unhealthy attachment that uses spirituality to excuse red flags. This matters because the twin flame journey is not meant to make you abandon your standards. It's meant to reveal what's real, what's fear, what's conditioning, and what's karmic residue that still has authority over your choices. By the end of this video, you will stop panicking over the contradiction. You will be able to look at this connection and instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" you'll know how to ask the right question. What is this connection trying to show me about myself? You'll gain clarity around why your logic is shaking, what your nervous system is reacting to, and how spiritual attraction can expose hidden conditioning without forcing you to betray yourself. Most importantly, you'll walk away with a calmer, sharper inner compass so you can discern whether this connection is truly an awakening or simply an old pattern wearing a sacred label. So stay with me until the end, because the answer you're about to hear may not only explain him, it may finally explain you. Section 1. Opposites on the human plane, purpose on the soul plane. On the third-dimensional human plane, twin flames often look like the last person you would ever pick on paper. The mind expects compatibility to be visible and logical, shared background, shared beliefs, shared lifestyle, an easy story your family and friends can understand. But twin flame connections rarely arrive through the comfortable door. They arrive through the door that exposes what you've built your identity around. This is why, in so many twin flame experiences, the two people can appear like total opposites, different countries, different religions, different cultures, different traditions. Sometimes there is a significant age gap that immediately triggers judgment from the outside and fear inside you, or the circumstances are complicated in a way that feels almost offensive to your nervous system. One person may already be in another relationship, even when that goes against everything you normally value and everything you would typically choose for yourself. From a psychological perspective, this can feel confronting because it touches the deepest layers of your conditioning, your values, your sense of right and wrong, your reputation, your self-image, the version of yourself you've worked hard to become. You might feel conflicted not because you are weak, but because your mind is trying to protect the structure of your life. Your mind asks, how can this be real if it doesn't fit my standards? How can something feel so profound if it looks so complicated? And that internal tension can be upsetting, even destabilizing, because it forces you to face a truth most people avoid. Sometimes the most catalytic connections do not match the life plan you thought you were supposed to follow. So yes, coming to terms with these contrasts can take time, especially if you have never entertained anything like this before. It can feel like an identity crisis, because your attachment to what is acceptable is not only personal, it is social, cultural, and often ancestral. You may be carrying family expectations, community norms, and spiritual beliefs that tell you what love should look like. When the connection shows up outside those lines, you don't just question the connection, you question yourself. But here is the shift that changes everything. Once you understand what is happening beneath the personality, it becomes easier to see why these contrasts can show up. On the human plane, you are learning difference, discomfort, and discernment. On the soul plane, there is often a deeper purpose at work, one that is not trying to give you a perfect match, but trying to awaken you. These opposites don't appear to punish you. They appear to reveal what needs healing, what needs maturing, and what needs to be brought into truth. Because when a connection reaches the soul level, it doesn't only ask, do we match? It asks, are you aligned? Are you honest? Are you living from fear or from your highest self? And that is why twin flames can look so different on the surface, yet still activate something unmistakable underneath. The contrast is not the point. The contrast is the doorway into clarity, into inner authority, and into a love that requires you to become real with yourself before anything else can become real with another. If you've made it this far, take a slow breath and let this sink in, because sometimes the opposites you're facing aren't a sign that something is wrong. They're a sign that something deeper is being revealed. Reflect for a moment. What part of this connection challenges your identity, your values, or the version of love you thought you had to live by? And be honest with yourself. Are you reacting from fear of judgment or from the quiet knowing of your soul? I'd love to hear what's coming up for you. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts, your experience, or the biggest contrast you've had to confront on this journey. And if you're not ready to explain it all, simply type this affirmation in the comments. I trust the soul purpose beneath the contrast. Section 2. The soul recognizes what the mind cannot yet explain. When you meet your twin flame, something in you responds before you have language for it. And that is the first clue that this connection is not being processed through your usual human preferences. Your mind looks for familiar reference points, chemistry, compatibility, timing, shared lifestyle, logical reasons. But the soul does not enter this experience that way. The soul does not consult your current identity like it's a checklist. It does not prioritize what your human consciousness thinks it wants, or what it has been conditioned to choose. Instead, the soul recognizes, instantly, quietly, with a certainty that can feel both sacred and unnerving, because it arrives without explanation. At the level of soul, there is a memory that predates your personality. The soul knows perfection not in the sense of flawless behavior, but in the sense of divine pairing. It recognizes the architecture of a connection that was agreed upon beyond the limits of this lifetime. This is why, when twin flames meet, it can feel like something clicks in your being, even when your life circumstances make no sense. The soul understands that this is not random. It is a contract formed before you stepped into the dimensional plane you now call reality. And because the contract is older than your current story, it activates you from a place deeper than reason. This is also why the twin flame bond can feel strangely familiar and strangely disruptive at the same time. Twin flames, at the soul level, carry the same energetic blueprint, the same frequency, the same core signature. It is not simply that you match each other. It is that you are recognizing the same consciousness expressed through two bodies. One awareness descending from the God Self, polarized into two energetic expressions, so it can witness itself, learn through itself, and return to wholeness through lived experience. Two polar energies meeting across time and distance but originating from one source. In that sense, the encounter can feel less like meeting someone new and more like meeting a part of your own soul that has been walking outside of you. And because the soul operates from eternity, it is not governed by the rules that govern your human life. Your mind may insist the timing is wrong, the distance is impossible, the age gap is inconvenient. The social structures are complicated, the culture, the family expectations, the logistics your mind will build. A courtroom of reasons why this should not be happening. But the soul does not make decisions based on environment, circumstance, location, age, or social approval. Not because those things are irrelevant in human life, but because the soul is not ruled by them. The soul moves by purpose rather than preference. It moves by the momentum of destiny rather than the comfort of familiarity. This is the inner conflict so many people feel at the beginning of the twin flame journey. Your mind tries to explain what the soul has already recognized. Your mind tries to negotiate, label, and control what the soul experiences as truth. And when the mind cannot yet explain it, it often panics because it doesn't like surrendering authority. But the soul is not here to satisfy the mind. The soul is here to awaken it. And sometimes awakening begins with a recognition so deep that, for a while, it makes no sense at all except in the silent place within you that already knows. Section 3. One consciousness, two polar energies. A twin flame connection begins at a level the mind can't easily measure because it isn't created by personality, preference, or ordinary attraction. At its root, a twin flame is consciousness expressing itself through polarity, one field of awareness dividing into two polar energies, so it can be experienced, witnessed, and understood in the physical world. One moves as yin, one moves as yang, what many people call the feminine and the masculine, not as rigid gender roles, but as complementary energetic currents. And through that polarity, the same soul gains a mirror. This is why, when you come into contact with your twin, it can feel like you're being recognized from the inside out. If you are the yin expression of that shared consciousness, you are not merely observing the masculine, you are sacredly witnessing the yang. You feel his presence not only in his words or behavior, but in the energetic architecture behind him. Something in you registers the pattern of him before you have a story for it. And if you are the yang expression, you are sacredly witnessing the feminine in the same way, feeling her as a living truth that reaches beyond surface impressions. In both cases, the connection is not simply two people meeting. It is one soul learning itself, seeing itself, and remembering itself through the mirror of polarity. And that mirror is powerful precisely because it is polar. Polarity creates contrast, tension, longing, revelation. It brings hidden material to the surface. It exposes where you are integrated and where you are fragmented. The feminine may mirror emotional truth, intuition, devotion, and the capacity to feel. The masculine may mirror direction, responsibility, protection, and the capacity to act. Again, not as stereotypes, but as energetic functions that, when balanced, create wholeness. When imbalanced, they create triggers. So the twin flame dynamic isn't here to flatter the ego, it's here to educate the soul. It is consciousness encountering its own reflection and being forced into honesty. That is also why the connection can feel undeniable, even when your mind produces 100 reasons it shouldn't make sense. Your mind reads the outer story, the timing, the distance, the circumstances, the complications, the social realities, the past wounds. The mind is trained to evaluate what is visible and predictable, but your soul is responding to something older than the outer storyline. It is responding to the original blueprint, the shared frequency that existed before the current lifetime added its layers of identity and fear. So when your mind tries to argue you out of it, the soul doesn't debate, it recognizes, it remembers. It says, this is familiar, even if the life around it is unfamiliar. And that inner recognition can be destabilizing because it exposes the gap between who you think you are and what you actually are. The twin flame connection is not just love, it is awakening through polarity. One consciousness, two expressions, meeting in the human world so the soul can come back into wholeness, not by fantasy, but by truth. Imagine a divine feminine who meets someone while her life looks completely wrong. For it on paper, different city, different background, messy timing, and a mind full of reasons to stay guarded. Yet the first time they speak, it isn't fireworks as much as recognition. Her nervous system goes quiet, her chest softens, and she feels strangely seen without performing. Then the polarity begins to teach. His yang energy mirrors structure and action. He may not say much, but his presence makes her notice where she overextends, where she people-pleases, where she abandons her own boundaries just to keep peace. Meanwhile, her yin energy mirrors emotional truth. She doesn't force him, but her very clarity exposes where he hides, avoids, or delays responsibility. They trigger each other not to punish but to reveal. She feels his inconsistency like a spotlight on her self-worth, and he feels her grounded no like a mirror to his integrity. Even when their minds start listing the complications, This doesn't fit my plan. This can't be safe. This will ruin my routine. Their souls keep responding to the same underlying blueprint. One consciousness learning itself through two polar expressions, pulling them back toward balance, wholeness, and a more honest version of love. Section 4. Why so many twins arrive now? You didn't enter this lifetime by accident. On a psychological level, people are drawn into certain eras because their nervous systems, personalities, and life lessons are shaped for the kind of pressure and the kind of growth that era demands. On a spiritual level, your consciousness arrived with purpose. And when many awakened souls arrive at once, like we are witnessing now, it is rarely random. It is a pattern that signals collective awakening, a wave of people who are meant to carry a new frequency into a world that has been operating on fear, control, and survival for far too long. This moment in human history is not just chaotic, it is initiatory. You are watching the breakdown of a dense, survival-based identity, the version of self that lives in constant defense, constant proving, constant bracing for loss. That identity was necessary in older timelines. It helped humanity endure, but it cannot carry us forward. The twin flame catalyst often activates precisely here because twin flame energy exposes whatever is still rooted in scarcity, trauma bonding, or emotional survival. It doesn't just bring romance to the surface, it brings evolution to the surface. It pushes you to become honest, to become coherent, to become responsible for your own energy. And this is what ascension looks like in real life. It is the movement from density into light, not in a fantasy sense, but in an embodied sense. A shift from living as a wounded personality into living as a healed presence. From reacting to life to relating to life. From identity built on protection to identity built on truth. In spiritual language, you could call it the transition toward a more luminous way of being a body of light. In psychological language, it is the nervous system learning safety, the mind learning clarity, and the heart learning integrity. It is consciousness becoming inhabitable again. For those of you who are more advanced within this framework, you may feel that this goes even further. You are not only here to heal personal karma and create healthier attachment, you are here to expand into a cosmic identity. That does not mean escaping Earth. It means remembering that your awareness is larger than one story, one lifetime, one label. It means working with the galactic mind, the broader intelligence that moves through intuition, synchronicity, frequency, and multidimensional knowing. It means relating to yourself as a multidimensional being, someone whose inner life is not just thoughts and feelings, but currents, timelines, and spiritual intelligence unfolding through the body. This is why twin flames are appearing from many different backgrounds, cultures, and categories. It is not about one type of person. It is about a collective function. Twin flame connections arrive in mass to awaken the planet, to awaken humanity, and to stabilize the field during a time of rapid transformation. Their love, when matured into Dharma, becomes a spiritual technology. It teaches coherence, it teaches accountability, it teaches alignment. And that alignment is not just personal, it becomes planetary. Because Mother Earth is not only a setting for your life story, she is a living consciousness. Many of you feel her as Lady Gaia, an intelligence moving through profound energetic shifts. When Earth upgrades, everything living on her surface feels it. Emotions intensify, old systems shake, relationships fracture or deepen, truth rises. Twin flames, when they do their work, help protect the ascent, not through force, but through frequency, through anchoring peace where there was chaos, through bringing clarity where there was confusion, through embodying love where there was survival. And that is the deepest reason so many are arriving now. So that as Earth moves through these profound energetic shifts, she can move with more grace, more ease, and more gentleness, and so can you. If you've made it this far, take a slow breath and let this land not just in your mind, but in your body. Because this isn't information, it's a mirror, a reminder that your experiences may be personal, but they are not isolated. So I want you to pause for a moment and reflect what has been intensifying in your life lately. What patterns have been dissolving? What truth have you been unable to ignore? Share your story in the comments, your awakening, your twin flame turning point, the way you felt Gaia shifting beneath your feet. And if you don't feel ready to explain it all, simply type this affirmation word for word. I anchor light, truth, and harmony in divine timing. Section 5. The feminine focus, healing, and rebirth. Right now, the universe is placing a clear spotlight on feminine energy, and not as a trend, not as a personality type, and not as being softer. This focus is happening on multiple levels at once. Within twin flames themselves, within the collective emotional field of humanity, and within the Earth's own healing process. From both a psychological and spiritual lens, this makes perfect sense. When a system is ready to evolve, it does not merely upgrade on the outside, it reorganizes from the inside out. And that kind of transformation requires feminine qualities: receptivity, embodiment, intuition, emotional truth, and the ability to hold complexity without collapsing into fear. Ascension, in its truest form, is not escape, it is integration. It is the movement from survival-based living into soul-led living. And spiritually, ascension is also rebirth and emergence into a new frequency of being. Rebirth carries a feminine signature because the feminine is the gateway through which life, consciousness, and new timelines are gestated. Psychologically, you could say it like this: you cannot create a new identity without first creating an inner womb of safety, where the old self can dissolve and the new self can form. That is why the feminine is being emphasized, because the new Earth cannot be built on nervous system dysregulation, emotional avoidance, and unresolved trauma. A higher timeline requires a higher capacity. This is also why many twins experience an intense call toward deep feminine healing, sometimes even a doubling of it. Not because the feminine is broken, but because the feminine is foundational. When the feminine heals, the entire relational field shifts. When the feminine stabilizes, the timeline stabilizes. For many divine feminines, this phase can feel like a relentless inner renovation. Old patterns rising, ancestral wounds resurfacing, body-based triggers revealing themselves, boundaries strengthening, standards becoming non-negotiable. Yet this is not regression, it is recalibration. The psyche and the energy body are clearing what cannot follow you into the next level of embodiment. Twin flames do not come together to play out romance the way the world defines it. They come together to heal themselves, to accelerate growth, and to fast-track the evolution of consciousness. In psychological terms, this connection activates rapid mirroring. It exposes the unconscious, amplifies what is unresolved, and forces both beings to confront the parts of themselves they could previously avoid. In spiritual terms, it is a catalyst for quantum jumps, timeline shifts, that occur when you stop repeating the old self and choose alignment with truth, responsibility, and divine order. For many twins, this journey does include reunion, real reunion, at the level of soul, in physical form. But even that reunion is not the goal the ego imagines. It is an outcome of alignment, not a reward for suffering. And for many others, the purpose is wider than the relationship itself. Their union frequency becomes service on a planetary level, anchoring new Earth codes into daily life, into community, into how they speak, love, create, parent, work, and lead. They are here to ground a more harmonious template of reality, one that does not require unnecessary deconstruction, chaos, or trauma to evolve. Because the highest timeline is not built through destruction, it is built through coherence, through healed embodiment, through feminine wisdom that knows when to soften, when to stop, when to wait, and when to rise. And right now, that is exactly what the feminine is being asked to do. Heal deeply, remember her original frequency, and become the living doorway through which rebirth enters the world. If you've ever caught yourself thinking, why would I even like this person? Please hear this with compassion. That question doesn't mean you're confused, broken, or off the path. It often means you're standing at the exact threshold where mind, logic, and soul truth collide. Because on the human level, the contrast can feel almost ridiculous. You may not share the same lifestyle, the same communication style, the same emotional maturity, the same priorities. Your nervous system might even protest the inconsistency. Your rational mind scans the evidence and says, This doesn't add up. And it's right, it doesn't add up in the language of comfort. But the soul does not speak the language of comfort. The soul speaks the language of recognition. On the soul level, the feeling can be exact. Not because the connection is perfect, but because it is precise. It hits the places in you that other connections bypass. It activates the truths you can't unsee. It exposes the wounds you've learned to manage. It pulls you toward the parts of yourself you've postponed. And that is why it can feel so intense even when your mind can't justify it. Your soul isn't trying to fit this person into your preferences. It isn't trying to build a relationship that protects your comfort zone. It is trying to fulfill a contract, one that points toward awakening, healing, integration, and destiny. And when you finally understand that this connection isn't built from shared hobbies, shared timing, or shared convenience, but from shared essence, the entire puzzle starts to make sense. You stop asking the punishing question, how could this possibly be my twin? And you begin asking the liberating one, what is this connection here to awaken in me? And what is it asking me to become? Because that is the real purpose of sacred connections, not to complete your personality, but to activate your evolution, not to distract you from your path, but to bring you back to it. And whether union happens in form or not, the higher outcome is always the same. You return to your truth with more clarity, more self-respect, and more spiritual maturity than you had before you met them. Now, if this conclusion hit something deep in you, I want you to do one thing. Leave a comment that clearly says, I choose soul truth over mind logic, and I commit to becoming who this connection is awakening in me. Then please like this video, share it with someone who's been silently wrestling with this kind of connection, and watch the video below, because what we're going into next will help you understand exactly how to navigate this awakening without losing yourself.